There's a perfume that costs $205,000, officially recognized by Guinness World Records as the most expensive perfume ever sold. And there's a perfume that costs less than $200, made by a house with almost 2 centuries of history behind it, still using a formula that's barely changed in 60 years. Most people assume the difference between those two bottles is just marketing. A bigger name, a fancier box, a higher number because someone decided it should be higher. That's not true. Every single price jump in luxury perfume represents something real. Different ingredients, different levels of scarcity, different amounts of craftsmanship that your own nose can actually detect once you know what you're smelling for. Today, I'm taking you through all 7 levels of luxury perfume, from your first real step up out of the department store, all the way to the most expensive bottle ever officially recorded on Earth. By the end, you'll know exactly what you're paying for at every single level, and more importantly, exactly where your own money should actually go. We're going to walk through this level by level. Real perfumes, real verified prices. And at every single level, I'll tell you exactly what that price is actually buying you. Plus one honest thing most channels won't tell you about that tier, the part that usually gets left out of the marketing entirely. By the end, you'll be able to look at any perfume price tag and actually understand what you're looking at, instead of just guessing whether it's worth it. This is where real luxury actually starts, not at the department store counter, where you're mostly paying for a name and a celebrity campaign, but one small step above it, where the quality finally starts to genuinely match the price tag in a way mass-market perfume simply can't manage. Our example here is Habit Rouge Parfum by Guerlain, sitting around $180. Here's what makes it worth talking about. This exact formula was created back in 1965. It has been kept almost completely intact for over 60 years, through a house that's been perfecting its craft since 1828, nearly 2 centuries ago. That's not a coincidence, and it's not laziness either. That's a company protecting something it already knows is close to perfect, refusing to mess with a formula just to chase a trend. On the skin, it opens warm and a little spicy, orange and bergamot up front, then slowly settles into something smooth, woody, and confident that lasts for hours without shouting for attention. It doesn't smell like it's trying to impress anyone in the room. It just quietly, consistently does. Here's the honest part most people won't tell you about level 1. A lot of houses at this tier are now owned by massive parent companies, huge conglomerates that manage dozens of unrelated luxury brands at once, from fashion to jewelry to fragrance, all under one roof. The story of an independent, passionate perfume house is still real in the history books, but today, decisions about that same formula also run through a much bigger business machine with quarterly targets and shareholders. That doesn't automatically make the perfume worse. It just means the romantic, small workshop story printed on the box isn't the entire picture anymore. At level 2, something genuinely changes. You're no longer buying a big brand's mass-produced version of luxury. You're buying a smaller house's actual argument for what perfume should be, built by people who care specifically about that one idea. Our example is Leighton by Parfums de Marly, priced around $295. This is where ingredient quality starts to shift in a way you can genuinely, physically smell. Real sandalwood instead of a synthetic stand-in trying to fake the same warmth. Apple, lavender, black pepper, and vanilla, layered so carefully that the perfume feels like it's constantly introducing new sides of itself to you over the course of a day, rather than dumping the entire experience on you the moment you spray it. That kind of layering, where a scent slowly reveals different characters over 8, 10, sometimes 12 hours, is genuinely expensive to build correctly. It requires real raw materials that behave the way only real raw materials behave when they interact with body heat and skin chemistry, something synthetic shortcuts simply can't fully replicate. Here's the honest part about level 2. Several of the most beloved, most talked about names at this exact tier have quietly been bought up by giant global beauty conglomerates in recent years. The independent artistic image still printed proudly on the label doesn't always match who's actually signing the checks and setting the budgets behind the scenes anymore. It's worth knowing who actually owns the house whose story you're buying into, because that ownership can quietly shape decisions about the formula down the road, sometimes without the customer ever noticing the change. Level 3 is where perfume crosses into genuine, widely recognized prestige. This is Creed territory. Our example is Aventus, Arguably the most talked about men's fragrance released in the last 20 years, sitting somewhere in the $300 to $400 range, depending on size and where you buy it. What earns Aventus its reputation isn't one single dramatic note. It's the way pineapple, birch, and smoky woods work together to create something that smells genuinely expensive without smelling quite like anything else on the market at any price. It opens confident and a little fruity, moves into something smoky and rich, and somehow manages to smell noticeably different from person to person, depending on their own skin chemistry, which is part of why collectors talk about it so obsessively. Here's the part worth knowing, honestly, and this one actually matters if you're spending this kind of money. Creed has one of the most talked about quality control issues in the entire luxury perfume world. Because their batches are produced over time in different runs, some batches are widely considered by longtime collectors to be noticeably better than others, and older batches from before certain production changes often sell for a real, documented premium on the resale market. When you buy a bottle at this level, you're not just buying a formula on paper. We're buying into an ongoing conversation about consistency that serious collectors have genuinely been having for years, and it's smart to know that before you spend this much. It's also worth saying that Creed's story leans heavily on its history, a house with roots tracing back over 2 centuries, having reportedly dressed royalty and heads of state along the way. That history is part of what you're paying for here too, whether or not it shows up directly in the bottle. Some collectors think that's completely fair. Others think the brand leans on that story a little too hard at this price point. Both opinions are common in the community, and it's worth forming your own once you've actually tried it yourself. Level 4 brings us to Roja Parfums, and specifically Elysium, priced anywhere from around $170 to $380, depending on the exact concentration and where you're buying it from. Roja Dove spent decades running one of the most exclusive perfume counters in the entire world, inside Harrods in London, before eventually starting his own house. Elysium reflects that background directly, a bright, confident citrus built from lemon, lime, and herbal notes like thyme and artemisia up front, before settling into something warmer, woodier, and far more grounded than a typical citrus fragrance ever manages to reach. What's genuinely impressive here is the longevity, and this matters more than it sounds. Citrus perfumes are notoriously hard to make long-lasting, because the exact ingredients that smell brightest and freshest also tend to fade the fastest, sometimes within an hour or two on lower quality formulas. Making a true citrus fragrance actually last through an entire day takes real skill, real material cost, and none of the usual shortcuts. The honest note here, and it's an important one, the price range for Elysium is genuinely wide, and that's not an accident or a mistake. Concentration strength, bottle size, and exactly where you buy it from all shift that final number significantly. Always check the current actual listed price before assuming what tier you're really paying for, because the label alone won't tell you. If you're finding this genuinely useful so far, stick around, because the next 3 levels are where the numbers get completely wild, and where perfume stops being something you just wear. Level 5 belongs entirely to Clive Christian, starting with 1872, priced around $500 as the entry point into the house's full standard. Here's something most people genuinely don't know. Clive Christian's brand traces its roots directly back to the Crown Perfumery, founded in 1872, and granted the official right to use the royal crown as a symbol by Queen Victoria herself, over 150 years ago. That royal connection isn't decorative marketing dressed up for a modern audience. It's real, documented history the house has genuinely earned and can trace directly. At this level, formulas are typically built using well over 100 individual ingredients, at concentrations most other perfume houses simply can't financially justify, because the raw material cost alone would eat their entire profit margin. The result is a fragrance with real, noticeable depth and real staying power, the kind that lasts long after most perfumes at lower tiers have completely faded from your skin. Level 6 moves you into a completely different kind of purchase entirely. At this point, you're no longer really buying something to wear casually every day. You're buying something to own, the same way someone might collect a rare watch or a limited pressing of a favorite record. Our example is the Xerjoff Amphore collection, a limited series of rare attar oils, each one housed in its own decorative vessel and finished with a semi-precious stone set into the cap, priced between roughly $1,500 and $1,850 for just 6 milliliters of liquid. Attar oils are built completely differently from a normal spray perfume, and that difference is worth understanding. They're pure, concentrated oil, without any alcohol at all, which means the scent sits much closer to the skin and lasts dramatically longer than a typical eau de parfum. A few drops can genuinely outlast an entire day and still be noticeable that evening. And now, the top of the mountain. There are actually 2 different paths to get here, and they're worth understanding separately. The first path is Clive Christian's #1 Imperial Majesty. In November of 2005, the house created a 10-bottle limited edition, officially recognized by Guinness World Records as the most expensive perfume ever sold anywhere in the world. $205,000 for a single bottle, housed in genuine Baccarat crystal, wrapped in an 18-karat gold collar, and set with an actual 5-karat white diamond. 10 bottles were made, total, not per year, not per region, 10 bottles ever, in the entire history of the product. But there's an even more exclusive path than buying a bottle off a shelf, no matter how expensive or rare that shelf happens to be. It's called bespoke, and it works completely differently from everything else on this list. Henri Jacques, a French perfume house founded in 1975 near Grasse, spent nearly 40 years working exclusively for private clients, building fully custom fragrances designed entirely around one single person's life, memories, and personality, long before the house ever opened a single public boutique anywhere in the world. Their bespoke commission service today starts somewhere around $111,000, and the entire process, from the first consultation to the finished bottle, can genuinely take months to complete from start to finish. At that point, you're not really buying a finished product off a shelf anymore. You're commissioning something that has never existed before in human history, and will never exist again once it's made and delivered to you. No marketing campaign, no clever bottle design, no glossy packaging can replicate that specific feeling. It's arguably the single most personal form of luxury that perfume has to offer anyone, at any price.